And we're live. We did it.
Yeah.
um,
Woohoo.
well, this is my first attempt at a Substack Live, so I will
Mine
attempt
too.
to, combine some things I've done on my podcast with a live video. So let's see how it goes. If you just joined us, thanks for being here, and hope you'll stick around. So welcome back to the Things Not Named. I'm Joshua Dolezal, and this year I've been asking writers how their writing sensibilities have been forged and how they know high quality writing when they see it. And my guest today is Holly Starley. Holly is the author of Holly Starley's Rolling Desk, which she writes from her DIY van, also known as Vivian. She's got solar panels on the roof, steadily changing views out the window, and community wherever she lands. But before Holly was roaming the countryside, she was an award winning journalist in West Virginia and the managing editor of a cycling magazine. She's founded a radio station, taught courses in person and online, and rebuilt a van with her own two hands. Holly's also been a freelance editor for more than 20 years. When she's not chronicling her van life, Holly works one-on-one with authors as a self-editing coach. She's a co-founder of the Caravan Writers Collective, where you can find on-demand courses, write-ins, and many other resources for your writing practice. So thanks for joining
Sure.
me, Holly.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction.
Well, so just to kick things off, I'm curious where you're calling in from since you've been on the road so much. And I want to hear a little bit more about your first van, but where are you calling in from today?
Um, Today I am in the Pacific Northwest, or more specifically, I'm in Oregon near Corvallis, visiting a cousin. Um, we'll be in Washington next week, though. So on the road soon. Yeah,
About to take Vivian back out.
yeah, yeah. Very
And
excited about that.
so Vivian is your second DIY van, is that right? Or third?
The second. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And so for most of the time you've been doing Holly Starley's Rolling Desk, you had Ruby Van Jangles or Von Jangles. Tell me about Ruby.
Ruby Van Jangles. So yeah, I got her in 2019, summer of 2019. Moved in straight away. I had my daughter had just moved out, and I was just kind of I worked as a freelance editor at the time primarily, and could do that from anywhere. So she was just this empty canvas. Everything had been stripped out of the back, and so I slowly built her out and got on the road and went down to Arizona, and then eventually all the way up to northern Alaska, and kind of back and forth a lot, and just spent a lot of time. I was somewhat still new to living in a van when the pandemic hit, which was really an interesting thing for me and for my writing, because I spent a lot more time in solitude and sort of wild spaces than I probably would have otherwise. And that was turned out to be really lovely.
And if I'm not mistaken, you years ago had a little taste of van life. I think you went through a divorce years ago and rebuilt or sort of rehabilitated a mobile home. And so,
Yes, I
so this
forgot.
is kind of your second act uh, as a traveler.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
right?
true. That's true. The leprechaun. Yeah, I got divorced and moved into a 26-foot Chevy Leprechaun, and had pink shag carpet, and I didn't do a lot of. I did some repair work in there, but yeah, that was,
Mhm.
I guess, my first life on the road. Lasted not quite a year, but it was fun.
Yeah. Well, it's such a novel concept for your Substack. The idea of a rolling desk, and I think it captures one form of this kind of open horizon that we have for independent writing. That
Yeah,
it's really not in the traditional boxes of you kind of are under the thumb of a publisher or an editor, and you're out there traveling and putting things out in real time when you're able to. And so I want to circle back to that sort of the wild west of writing and how we're all finding our place in it, even having cut our teeth on more traditional structures and systems. But first, I'd kind of like to go back So you were a journalist initially, but even before that, when you uh, started thinking of yourself as a writer, what were some of your influences? Did you have teachers that really impacted you, or writers that really shaped your sensibility early on?
Yeah, I think I started thinking of myself as a writer when I was 10. Um, I was a huge reader and just kind of read anything I could get my hands on, either at the library or on my like parents' shelves. And I would, after lights out and we were supposed to be in bed, I would go and make a little nest in the closet and read in there uh, till I fell asleep. And I had in high school, I had a writing teacher, Mrs. Roskowski, who was really wonderful. Her creative writing class was great. And then I kind of went through, we'll call it a rebellious period, and moved out of my parents' home early. And I think there was a brief period there where reading and writing were not the top of my list. But then immediately got back into it and finished up college in West Virginia. And there I had a writing mentor, Jerry LaFemina. He is a prolifically published author, and just he introduced me to prose poetry.
Mhm.
And I did an independent study with him, and but I was thinking about this because I knew we were going to talk about this, and realized that, like, no matter what I've done in my life, reading's been, I mean, this is probably true for most writers, but reading's been huge. Like, I put myself through college by, cleaning houses and would listen to books on tape, which I call Audible now, any sort of listening, but just constantly. And then I've kind of read, I think, more sporadically than some writers do. I certainly have authors that I've, like, loved and then read everything that they've written, but
Mhm.
I'm a little bit more sporadic. I love having the rhythm of someone's whose work I love in my head, in my ear,
Mhm.
and that's a big part of my life today as well.
Yeah. Well, when I was coming of age as a writer, because I grew up without a television, and so I read for entertainment and, was more bookish than probably 99% of my peers. And a lot of my influences were older, so I was trying to write like Nathaniel Hawthorne and so on. I was being praised by that, or for that, by teachers
Mhm.
all along, until I took a creative nonfiction seminar in grad school with Ted Kuzer, and he was pretty merciless in telling me when, in his words, my writing was overcooked. He would write that word in the margins, and I would realize, oh, okay, I'm being too fancy, I'm being too intellectual, I'm trying too hard, or I'm piling on too many adjectives or including details that no one needs to know. It's,
Mm,
as Stephen King
mhm,
would say, door shut writing versus door open. Um, and so that's when a big shift in my writing happened. Or before, I was writing freely, expressively. Most people were telling me it was good, and I didn't really know the difference between what I was reading and what I was writing
mm.
until I had a mentor. So when did that shift happen for you? Or are you still kind of in process where what's enjoyable or what feels good to you is a little bit different from the kind of writing you have to strive for or aspire toward, that we would think of as writing of high craft? When did that
Mm.
awareness kind of come in for you?
When did the awareness of writing, not thinking of high craft versus writing versus thinking of it, is that what you're asking?
When did you start
Uh,
becoming aware of choices you were making to elevate your writing, or make it stronger from a craft perspective?
yeah, that's interesting. Well, I've had a 20-year editing career. And so I think a lot of my thinking about craft was formed in working with other people's writing as much as in my own. Because I had to think about, I did developmental editing and content editing and just a lot of different. I had to think about, why am I saying this to this person? Why do I think this character development isn't working, or this, it needs. I'm huge on concision. I love I love cutting my work and other people's work, which is not something that's true for everybody. But so I think that's I mean, certainly Jerry LaFemina during my college talked a lot about uh, craft points and lyricism, and I love lyricism in
Mhm.
prose. Um, but I do think that my craft points were developed a lot from talking to other people about what they were doing and what was working and what wasn't, and like not wanting to just say because I said or because it sounds better or whatever. To think about like why I'm saying that. And in my own writing, I think I don't think about craft during first drafts at all.
Mhm.
I just like get it out there. But I for sure do. I go through a process of editing in a way that I have taken other writers through processes of editing and realized like, oh my gosh, I really like having a relationship with myself as both the writer and the editor. I don't know if that
Mm.
answered your question.
Well, I'm in my typically obtuse academic way trying to get to the magic. How do we make the magic happen? And I think that a
Yeah.
lot of us come of age in these, formalized structures where we get graded on something, and that's how we're told what's good or what's not.
Right.
If your writing is filled with fluff, or as one of my teachers put it, frothy blather, then you get called on that on a grading rubric or something, and that's your sort of okay. Well, maybe this is all subjective and the teacher's got this taste and I've got this taste and it doesn't mean anything. Or maybe you take it to heart and you think, okay, well, this is something to shoot for. I want
Mm,
this discerning reader to value my work or tell me that I'm making progress. And so you aim possibly for that mark. Or you get hired as an editor. So in your freelance writing career, I don't know what standard you're using, but if you began that um, career as an in-house editor, then there's a style guide or there's something that is your kind of objective reference point for craft. Here's why I'm making these changes. It's Strunk and White or it's a copy editing manual. There's some kind of other text that's telling you what is good and what's not. Right.
sure. Sure.
So
Yeah.
when you're editing, what are you basing those suggestions on? Like concision. Why is that necessarily a virtue? Why shouldn't we be writing purple purple prose instead of, you know, let it all out
Well,
instead of holding it back?
sure. That's a good point. I mean, I think, first of all, I think every rule is made to be broken. So there is 100% times when concision is not called for. Um, but why in general, I think in general, we are, we tend to, I think we tend to overwrite. I think people tend to overwrite uh, because you want to explain. I think that a reader loves to be trusted to, sort of infer, trusted to sort of be taken along in the process, not be, this is, you need to know every single detail. I think it kind of mirrors the way that we take in life. Like there's so much going so with Hemingway's iceberg theory, there's like so much going around us and in life we go through and we're only noticing this, that, and the other. Well, I think that's true for authors and what we're putting on the page, that like it's important that we pick out what we show and why we show that. But to get to your question about how do I make those decisions? What guides? I was never an in-house editor. So the guides I was using was just like the Chicago Manual of Style or like whatever AP style, whatever style guide I was using, but not anything that was very craft oriented. So
Mhm,
that came from my own reading and studying, I think, more than anything else.
mhm. Yeah. So as a freelance editor, people just find you, or are you assigned projects by some external entity? How does that work for you?
All of the above. I started out freelance editing after I left journalism and got divorced at the same time and moved from West Virginia to Seattle. And I
Mhm,
put an ad in the paper that and in Craigslist that said I was an editor. And that's how I got my first two. And I always laugh. My first two clients were probably my most well paid editing and my worst paid editing. that I've ever done in my life, just because I didn't know how to charge. I didn't know what it was exactly what I was doing. So I've done a lot of that, just finding clients word of mouth. But and then for a long time, I worked with some vanity presses, or where I was getting assigned uh, work from them.
Mm.
So kind of a little bit of everything. Or like I'll meet somebody on the street. If you tell anybody on the street, I'm sure you've noticed this, but especially I've noticed during various travels, if you say you're a writer, everybody has a story to tell. And if you say you're an editor, they really want you to see their story. So I have
Oh.
had
Hmm.
clients come that way. So
I've had the opposite experience. I've always been told I was kind of intimidating. So as a teacher, I was always crouching down next to my students' desks, and trying to be at their level and sort of overcome that. So if I tell people that I was an English professor or an editor, then immediately they start watching their grammar and don't want to show me anything. So um,
mm,
you must seem more friendly than I do at first blush.
I don't know. I mean, I'm also, yeah, very unintimidating in physical presence. Maybe that's part of it. And I do yeah. Once you say you're an editor, people are like, "Oh, are you editing my text messages?" Absolutely not. Like, I don't care about grammar in that at all in that
Mm.
sense. Uh, yeah.
Well, so I want to come back to the editing part because that's part of our life as independent writers, in this wild west of um, institutions collapsing and opportunities opening up and some of them closing. But I'm curious, uh, there was something that you said. I'll have to circle back to it. But when someone's coming to you and they're wanting you to edit their work, and you say it's coming from a vanity press, this is the thing I was trying to remember. I wonder if that's even a word we use anymore. When I've talked with people who are producing their work themselves, Samuel Lopez Barrantes is one of them. He's another Substack writer. Maybe you've seen his project. He went about it so mindfully with the requisitions. His novel, World War II novel, working with an artisanal printer in Paris. Doing a limited print run and promoting it. Within his circle and then on Substack. And so that's a very different kind of thing from someone who just had a book and wanted it out in the world and took a shortcut. So I wonder
Yeah.
if a term like vanity press is it still current, or do we need different terms for writers who are reclaiming the means of production, reclaiming, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Indie press
profit
is,
structure?
yeah. Yeah. I think indie press is the word that we should be using there. Because
Mhm.
um, I know you know Eleanor Anstruther and have talked to her, but she and I have talked about this term, and I think it's a great term, and it's a very very different thing. Um, not to get a lot of presses that call themselves vanity presses are, I believe, taking advantage of authors. So if I guess this is, I don't want to despair. I guess if I was talking to an author who wanted to especially publish something that was like, a literary piece or whatever. If you're going to go to a press, that make sure that they don't accept everything. If a press accepts everything that you send them and all you have to do is pay them some money, that is they're not, I don't know, that's not the route you want to go, unless like what you want is to put something out there that your friends and family could see.
Mhm.
End of story. But so yeah, I do think maybe vanity press shouldn't even be used anymore, but I don't think those sorts of presses are the same as self-publishing. Or I think self-publishing is as having, what a comeback or revival. I don't know. I'm hoping that's the case. Or
Mhm.
small presses. Yeah, I've been very impressed with people who have done like Eleanor's serializing and then her work towards indie presses.
Well, Eleanor and Samuel were both very encouraging and generous in their suggestions for me, and so I took advice from both of them with my poetry book, which I know you have a copy of,
Hmm.
along with
Yeah.
many other Substack writers. You're sort of a amazing citizen of Substack and supporting other writers. But one thing I loved from Samuel's project was, if you buy 10 ISBN numbers instead of one, then you can found your own imprint, which is one way of saying that, you're doing something more ambitious than just, you know, vanity publishing or self-publishing.
Mhm.
So his, I think, is Kingdom Anywhere. Mine is Syringa Books, and it could be anything. Um, Eleanor had very good advice about working with other independent designers and things through reedsy.com, which is a wonderful place to go if you're looking for
Yeah,
resources as well. And if you have high standards, you don't want someone to pick your book off the shelf and think, oh, this is a low budget production. If you want
absolutely.
the writing to be seen as quality, the production needs to match. So Reedsy was something Eleanor pointed me to that helped with that.
Oh, great. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's, I think, for me, one of the differences between vanity publishing, which is sort of the path of least resistance, and independent publishing as an ambitious form of meeting craft standards, for instance, which is why we're talking today.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think they're two very, very different things. There's a lot of spectrum there, but yeah, they're not it's not the same, and there's yeah.
yeah. Well, let me ask this question a different way.
Okay.
Um, how do you know good writing when you see it? This is one of those things that we all have tastes, we all have judgments. I'm hearing people. I'm going to really stop editorializing too much. Just let you tackle that one. But we're hearing so much about how we should just kill the editor. Get the editor out and just let it rip. Sam Cohn is kind of the most radical advocate of that on Substack. He doesn't edit anything really, and so the services that you provide, that I provide as a book coach, would be irrelevant to someone like Sam. And yet, I feel like if we're pursuing an art, something that we think of as an actual craft, then there have to be standards. We have to know that, not that we say good and bad necessarily, but there are things that resonate, and there are things that strike us hard and true, and things that don't.
Mm,
And so how do you know when you see good writing? What are the qualities that
yeah.
resonate with you?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is when I think, "I wish I had written that." But what you're asking more is, like, why do I wish that I had written that? And I think there's a lot to unpack in what you said there. Um, there's writing is good for me when it makes me feel something, think something, feel less alone, feel more connected to a wider world, see a perspective that I would not have had otherwise. Are those related to craft? Yeah, I think they are. Because, I mean, they don't necessarily have to be, but um, I just think that they are because I think that good writing, it's your podcast is perfectly named or perfectly well named because it's really, really hard to put your finger on, I think.
Mm, mm,
But yeah, I think there are definitely uh, how you do voice, like whether or not someone you're pulled in to. Like right now, I'm reading James Baldwin over again, and so I just finished If Bill Street Could Talk, and I'm reading Another Country, and that it's just so fascinating to see how he captures interior world and how those 2 books like, he does such a very different thing with those 2 books, and it's totally about voice. It's totally about the way
mm,
he either, like, pulls you in or, like, keeps you far away, and then,
mm.
obviously, uh, like, dialogue and character development are craft elements, but I love the craft elements that are, like, sentence level craft elements. I like a beautifully written sentence that contains within it like a metaphor that just sort of resounds with the bigger piece is I don't think something that you just happen on. I think you do that with skill, with practice, with reading other people and figuring out how did they do this thing that I love.
Mhm.
um I feel like I was wanted to say one thing else about what you said, but I don't remember.
Well,
I
I'll
don't
ask you
remember. Did
something
that
that
answer? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just to follow up, you said something about rhythm earlier, and
Okay.
I'm forgetting the author of the Lonely Planet Guide to Travel Writing, but I used that once in a travel writing course, and one of the so I'm kind of a monkey for terms. If I'm trying to teach someone to level up their writing, I want to have a term like the objective correlative to use, or I want to have ways of talking about metaphors and how they're constructed. And the term that this author used, I should have looked it up before our call, is the accordion of time. And so I wrote a
Mm,
post about that. And it's a technique that's essential for travel writing because if you just did the play by play from start to finish, and I'm sure this is something very familiar to you, it would be really tedious. You would bog down. If you've
mhm,
ever listened to someone tell tedious stories and they hover over every detail and every scene is drawn out to the same, you know,
mhm,
level
mhm,
of depth, then the dream is lost and there's no magic in it. You just can't wait to be anywhere other than in that story. But if you work the bellows of time and then you skip fast forward over days or weeks or months, and then you draw the bellows of time out on key moments, that's one of those techniques for pacing that's especially essential in a travel narrative
mhm,
where there's a
mhm.
lot of this happened, then this happened, then that happened, and you got to compress some of it and draw some of it out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
is that kind of thing? Are those terms that you use with folks in your classes or in your editing, or are you talking about voice more on a case by case kind of basis?
Maybe voice on a case by case basis, but I definitely so like I teach a class on braiding because I love braided works. I think it's somewhat arguable that most works are braided. Like
Mhm.
you there's like a journalistic piece on a politician, and it's gonna probably give a little background on where this person grew up, so in a way. But at any rate, definitely talk about specific techniques like how often do I use terms like anaphora or I don't know, a big fancier terms? I don't not necessarily that much, but I talk about like repetition. Repetition is super important in um braided works and a lot of works, and why and how do you do that. Um, I teach a self-editing course, which I this the idea of not editing anything is I what my first drafts are not. They are not ready for public consumption, and I'm anybody that can do that, well, that's amazing to me, but, to me, editing is writing, is that revising, and, so, yeah, I'm talking about specific ways you do specific types of, um you mentioned the accordion, which I use in a very different way, I think of that when I'm writing, my pieces sometimes do this, like, as through the different levels of editing, um I feel like I'm sometimes not quite answering your question. I'm getting
Oh,
lost
there's
in
no.
whatever I'm saying.
It's good. No, there's no right answer. No, it's just helpful, I think, because we have these judgments of what's good and what's not, and I think it's helpful to have language for the difference.
Mhm,
I don't know if this is putting you on the spot, but we could ask it maybe in a different way. As you say, there's this ineffable quality to good writing. It's, as Cather says, the thing not named. It's the presence on the page, the aura overtoned or divined by the ear, but not heard directly by it. You're not locating something, but you're sensing it, you're feeling it, and that's how you know it's good. But I think sometimes when we're reading, we have the opposite experience, which is we're disenchanted, we're thrown
mhm.
out of the dream, we're annoyed, we're irritated. There's something about it that produces the opposite response. So when you're reading bad writing, for lack of a better phrase, how do you know bad writing when you see it?
Um, I mean, you could talk about things like, let's talk about, like, say, dialogue. If somebody's using dialogue to give plot or background or, um just using a lot of clunkiness. I don't know, just clunkiness in prose is something that I might pick up on and be like, "Oof." Um, like you spoke about earlier, uh, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Not that's definitely typically doesn't work very well. Um, God, what else? I don't know. If you just don't if you don't buy the character, like if you're not you don't care.
Mm.
Um,
Flat characters who are one-dimensional, you don't
yeah.
have anything to love or hate about them, or they're just strict villains or strict saints. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I wanna shift in.
Cliche. Let's just talk about cliche
Okay.
too. There you go. That's I have heard a lot of different I don't know. I think that there's never a place for cliche. I think sometimes I'll put cliche phrases or whatever in my first drafts, and that is a clue to me that like why did you come up with this? But what do you actually mean? Like what's more yeah. So anyway, that's another one.
Well, yeah, I have a post about metaphors. The best ones I think are always epiphanies, and most cliches. Fish out of water was an epiphany to someone at some point.
Yes,
It was a perfect
exactly.
analogy, became a
Yeah,
cliche because it fit, but
yeah,
lost its magic because it became predictable.
yeah.
So yeah, wordiness. I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of an English professor still, but when I see you know plural nouns with apostrophes and things like that, there's magic lost. Even if it's Substack and we're supposed to all be free and easy on Substack, I feel like there's a sweet spot between. It's kind of like showing up to a date. I would tell my students, you don't just roll out of bed and run to a first date. That
Mhm,
doesn't mean you have to then completely clean yourself up and become a totally pretentious and unrealistic version of yourself to meet someone new. But there's somewhere in the middle where, yeah, you kind of clean yourself up, you make yourself publicly presentable without destroying your authentic self. And that, I think, is what we try to do in good writing. We're not just throwing our first draft out there because we respect our reader, we respect their time. We want them to feel like, we've taken some care with what we're sharing with them and it's worth their attention.
mhm,
So you do some of this with the Caravan Writers Collective, and in our time left, I wanted to shift into this future of writing and the writing life because it seems like there are infinite opportunities, but that's also because doors are closing. So
mm,
I left higher ed 4 years ago, fully intended. I got the Holy Grail. I got a tenure track job and then earned tenure and then full rank. I had it all. But the air around me changed. Higher ed changed. It became not the pursuit of beauty or truth, not the pursuit of knowledge, but, profit seeking or branding or drudge work like academic assessment. It wasn't really about the thing that had drawn me to the profession to begin with.
mm,
So I
yeah,
left, but when I did, I abandoned all the structures that had defined my writing life, submitting to writing journals, trying to get publication through traditional means that would be seen as reputable or within that structure. I
mhm,
don't have that anymore, so my standards are completely open. What satisfies my judgment is what's good.
mhm,
And so I can offer my services as a coach and, you know, the the sky is the limit with that. And you've been doing something similar, having worked in-house as a journalist, and now you're freelancing. So there are both benefits and kind of, scary trade-offs with that life. How do you manage uncertainty or, I guess, a lack of financial predictability that you would get with a salary position in your freelancing role? That's kind of a constant source of stress for us
yes,
independent writers, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, a funny anecdote, my brother once said to me, "You know, there's a theme that runs through everything that you're trying to do." And I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "It doesn't make any money." I was like, "That's true. That's true." That's true. So, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I'm fine with, like, I'm like, think I'm not materialistic or whatever, but yeah, it's rough. I mean, right now I'm driving DoorDash to get some extra funds because I had a huge change in my life recently. I don't it just it's part of the deal, and you just it's kind of hustle, like, with Caravan Writers Collective, we are this next coming semester, we call them semesters, seasons, whatever, we're we're teaching a whole sort of series on the hustle, like, what
Mhm,
it's a hustle to be a working writer, to
mhm,
you're doing gig work, you're looking I mean, for me, I'm right now submitting to a bunch of literary magazines and contests and, um pitching a couple pieces to different magazines, and so you're kind of just like juggling a ton of balls. I do self-editing coaching and work with people who want a little bit of help in that process. And so that it's just life. It's just it's been I've been doing this for a really really long time, so I don't really know anything else.
mhm. Yeah. Well, you'd mentioned something that changed for you. I know that you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder in 2023, 2 years ago. So that's limited some of your traveling, and I assume um, affected your work. So how have you maintained a writing life even though you're dealing with chronic illness?
Yeah, I just it's the most important thing to me in my life. And it's kind of in some ways cemented that maybe, I would say, because I like, in the beginning, before I knew, what was going on, I had taken a house sit, like a cabin sit for, like, 6 months, for the winter of 2023, 24, because I was like, "You know what? I really, really wanna start working on a book proposal for this memoir that I'm, in the middle of." And so I had done that, and then almost right when I moved in, I was struck with this, like, sudden pain, just full body pain. Had no idea where this, came from. Went from, like, jogging to shuffling in, like, 2 months. It was crazy. And I but through that, thing that I didn't stop doing was writing. And it just it was like the one thing that sort of took me out of it. And then it was about the same time I started publishing on Substack. So then I was not only writing, but, getting a community and getting instant feedback on my work, and it was just I think that without that, the, uh, autoimmune diagnosis, everything that's gone on would have been a lot worse, and so it's really cemented for me that, like, you know what? No matter what else, it's the thing that lifts me up and makes me feel a part of the world, um, and this is kinda going back a little bit to our craft discussion, but, like, we live these tiny ephemeral lives, and what we leave behind is a thing, but it's not just what we leave behind, it's like it's what how we speak to everything that everybody else has left behind. This like I think of writing as this conversation that has taken place since, as far back as, humans were writing. I guess that's a funny way to say it. But we're adding to that, and I think that's we're adding to how people have like in a craft sense too, like how people have learned how to do it better, do it differently, and like if you're it's just and I suppose everybody's doing that in their own way, like artists and uh, uh, dancers and even dentists, like everybody's kind of learning, but uh, I don't know. I just think it's a privilege and an honor and just a gift to be able to have that kind of conversation across time and geography and yeah, I don't
And
know.
across ability and what other differences separate us, right? So what
Totally. Yeah.
what you're describing is kind of a staple of illness narratives that they
Mm,
begin with that sense of having been othered. I think Christopher Hitchens described his cancer diagnosis as a forced deportation from Wellville to Tumortown. That's how he put it. And you're not a willing inhabitant of this new place, but but you are, and then you have to explain that difference to people who aren't. You have to write your way back into Wellville or make the connection with Wellville again through your writing. So, have you read many illness narratives? Is that part of your reading right now as you're working
I j-
through?
yeah, I just read Brain on Fire by Susanna Callahan, which I think was a New York Times bestseller maybe a couple years ago. She had a really interesting story. But to be honest, I came to that because she was judging a contest that I wanted to enter. And I didn't know that it was going to be, but I found that like very I don't know, kind of cathartic. And then do you know Kimberly Warner here on
Yep.
Substack?
Right.
Yeah. So her Unfixed series has been I feel like I was, it was just I found her very early on in the Substack journey, which was also in the diagnosis journey, and I've told her this, like reading her work, watching the documentaries she does with people, um, was huge when I was really and just to say I'm not in that kind of pain right now. I've been able to manage it, but during the time that I was, to just keep thinking like okay, you don't have I mean, of course, I wanna find solutions, but if they're not there, like, how do I how do I be okay anyways? How do I keep doing the things? How do I, find this new reality and find an okayness, a way to keep
Mhm.
creating and keep participating in the world? So her, and the people that she brought me to, her work has been really phenomenal. Alyssa Kennedy Jones, I don't know if you've heard her story with epilepsy and yeah, just it's been cool to connect with people.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Unfixed. I would have mentioned it if you hadn't. And I love how we can support each other as Substack writers and the kinds of work that's being produced now that might not have been, without the platform. I
Mhm,
was also thinking of, I mean, cancer narratives are perhaps the most common. Audre Lorde's The Cancer Diaries is timeless. She
mm,
writes a lot about the pressure to conform to a certain physical standard.
mm,
When she had breast cancer and was having a mastectomy, there was a lot of social pressure for her to accept a prosthetic, and she was thinking, I need to learn to embrace growth and change, embrace my body and its newness and not make someone else feel comfortable, and the way she's writing
mhm,
about that difference and embracing the difference and using the narrative to explain to someone who's outside her experience why she's making a certain decision and how perhaps to think about cancer in particular, but then breast cancer specifically differently.
mhm,
Um, it's just a wonderful illustration of literature's ability to both instruct and delight. You're brought
mhm,
into the narrative, but you learn something too. I
yeah,
think that's what good writing does, illness narratives in particular.
mhm.
So, so Holly, in closing, tell me a little bit about your book manuscripts. I'm sorry I stack all these questions on top of each other, but tell me about
No.
your two memoirs first, and then I'll save my other questions
Okay.
after that.
Yeah, so I'm working on 2 simultaneously, which I don't know if that's wise, but I can't that's how my brain is that's what's happening. That's how where my heart's going. But one is, the working title is My Body is the World, and it has, kind of the elevator pitch is that, 2 bodies fallen ill, my own and the body politic. Um, it just basically I started, like, seeing all these, I don't know, comparisons between what's happening in our political world here, particularly in the United States, and autoimmune disease, where sort of the call is coming from inside the house, and there was probably a lot of signs that you didn't miss, or that you missed, or pushed to the side, and so it's kind of that one I'm thinking of as a memoir and in essays, still narrative driven, but in essays that sort of talk about both what's going on in politics and that autoimmune diseases are really, really on the rise, and why is that? And yeah, so there's that. And then the second one is I don't know if you know the story of that. I have certainly written about it a little bit on Substack, but I had I got pregnant as a teenager, uh, gave my daughter up for adoption, and then when she turned 18, she came. We reconnected, and she came and lived with me for a few years. We're super super close now. We talk almost daily, and so working on another one that does has like 3 timelines, and one is that teenage period and that, most difficult decision of my life, and then
Mm.
our reconnection and sort of and now present.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the 2.
Wow. Powerful. I can't wait to read them both. Um, so my follow-up question is why, given that we both are kind of literary renegades in different ways, we've opted out of traditional structures with our work, our professional lives. So why are you chasing contests and pitching agents and doing the traditional path with these 2 projects? Or are
Yeah,
you?
I am. 'Cause I think pursue all avenues is a good idea. I want as far as why sending into contests and literary magazines, I wanna get my work out into the world, and sure, Substack does that, but it's not the only way. Um, I love a lot of literary magazines. I think they're beautifully designed, find some beautiful authors, and you know, I think it's a great way to go. And I'm pursuing an agent or probably, some sort of a small press, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't also pursue self-editing. I just think, why close any doors?
Mm.
I don't know.
So you're starting there and then maybe process of elimination or depending on the reception.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Well, I asked that partly because and when I left higher ed, I really believed that the only way I could have a legitimate independent writing life was if I got a book deal.
Mm,
But somehow because I'd spent my whole career justifying success according to these extrinsic markers of
mhm,
publication list or professional achievements that then would end up on a CV that some tenure committee would be reviewing or some awards committee would be reviewing. And increasingly, I've been questioning that and thinking, with literary magazines in particular, the submission fees, if you really are ambitious about submitting, you could spend hundreds, in submission fees a year, which most of us in the independent writing space don't have. And then also the commercialization of traditional publishing, the kinds of titles that they're looking for, the need to have a platform even before you pitch an agent because they're going to be asking if they can make money on you. The if you don't have 75,000 followers on Twitter or Instagram or you know you and I have more readers I think on Substack than we ever have through literary magazine publications, but still nowhere near what an agent would think of as, oh, that's an impressive platform. I know you can help with a promo campaign. So I felt like with all those kinds of conversations, the tail has been wagging the dog with
mm,
traditional publishing. And for myself, I would like to have support with marketing, but I realize that writers I just talked with River Selby. I know you've been looking through the archive.
mhm. Yeah,
River
fantastic.
had a wonderful, book deal on paper, but
Mhm,
almost no support at all with marketing, and has had a kind of seesaw experience as they've been writing about it between feeling elated and blessed and grateful, and then feeling like this is a real letdown according to what I was hoping for from a book contract. So I don't know that there's a right answer to it, but I know that fellow writers who go through the querying process talk about a grind. It's 100 agents that you have to commit to querying. And
mhm.
so I'm just curious when someone's getting ready to go through that with not one but 2 book projects,
Mhm.
what's the why behind it? Is it the illusion of greater reach? Is it that kind of external marker of legitimacy? Is it that you just don't have the bandwidth to market your own stuff?
Mm.
Or I mean, you already answered it. It's not leaving
Well,
any
no,
room
I mean,
left
I
for
have an interesting answer that's very, very or I don't know if it's interesting, it's interesting to me. It's very personal to me, is
okay.
that I think for many years, like, I I left, a religion in my childhood home early, and, like, I have done a lot of just eschewing any sort of, like, traditional whatever, like, my entire life. And I think maybe we have, like, an opposite thing going on there, where I'm like, "Okay, maybe you should just try the thing that's been the thing that everybody's d stop trying to do it your own way all the time. So maybe I'm in some ways coming back and just being like, "Why not just try it the way." And a lot of times I had thought, like when I got divorced and I moved to Seattle, and I was like, "Okay, now I'm gonna do the thing. I'm gonna write stuff and I'm gonna submit to literary journals," and bought a set myself up, maybe did that like once, and then I took a job selling pepper jelly at the Pike's Place Market, and like, ended up hanging out with the artisans and the artists there and being like, "Oh, this is, this is the screw that. I don't need, I don't know. I think I'm just like, why not just try it, see what happens, sort of a
Mm,
thing." Yeah, I'm
mhm.
not necessarily looking forward to the grind, and who knows? I always end up trying to do it my own way anyway, so that's probably what'll end up happening here.
Well, both of those books sound amazing, and I hope you'll keep writing about them, on Substack and letting us know how we can support you with that. Um,
Cool.
it's a good reminder, I think, as we approach the holidays that we can support each other with gift subscriptions, and if we have books, and you've been generous in buying and posting about my book, so good reminder to be a good Substack citizen and do that for others. But
Oh
I'm
yeah,
so great.
we all rise together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so grateful for you joining me today, Holly. And I think we'll wrap it up there. We'll say that's the thing not named for today, and
Sounds good.
to be continued.
All right. Thank you so much. I really am honored that you had me on and have enjoyed this conversation.
I appreciate it, Holly. Take care. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.